This is Edith Newmeyer, and I am the author of the book, The Mystery of Adam. I'm going to talk about Revelation today. And I have done a series of videos about 1.5 years ago, 2018, I believe I started in November. And that's when I actually started, was in my early time when I started my end times videos. And I have noticed that I changed in some ways. I realized that I was really conditioned to believe dispensationalism. And so when I woke up from dispensationalism, didn't even know the word at the time. I just knew something was wrong with what I believed, because things did not fit together, and I was praying and I was reading Revelation over and over again and praying that God would open my eyes and show me. And he did, and at that time I realized that the things that I learned were not making sense. And so God showed me through reading the word what revelation really means. Now, at that time, I didn't know everything either, so it took me at least 1.5 years to acquire what I know now. I mean, most of what I talked about in those videos is true. I confuse a lot of this great tribulation with the wrath of God, even though I know, and I knew it then, that there's a difference between great tribulation and wrath of God. I still kind of messed it up because I had this condition in my brain to think about great tribulation when it's really the wrath of God. And I hope you understand what I'm saying. I know I have a lot of new subscribers. And so I really want to do another video, and I'm going to try to put it kind of together, okay? About Revelation, because it's very important. You can read Revelation yourself and ask the Holy Spirit to help you. It doesn't take anything. I just want to give you some hints what you maybe should be watching out for. Okay, so let's get started. Now, Revelation, if we go to Revelation 1, let's see, I'm going to do that. Revelation 1. You see from the beginning that revelation is not something that will happen at the end. Okay? Not 2,000 years from the time that John had his visions. He says in verse 1, Revelation 1:1, he says, to show into his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel into his servant John. Okay, so servants here, he wants to show his servants. Who are the servants he's talking about? The servants are all believers. We are all servants of the Lord. Okay, it's not like some specific people that are servants and the others are not. No, we're all servants. We're all saints. Okay, John is a servant of God, and we're all a servant. So he is showing all of us what is going to happen shortly. Shortly does not mean 2,000 years down the road. Shortly means very shortly. Okay, shortly means pretty soon. So what we see in Revelation is what is starting almost after John had his revelation and John died. Now, it's very interesting that we understand that it's not something that happens 2,000 years from now, okay, or 2,000 years from John's time. The second thing that we need to understand is that Revelation, just like most books, the prophets, are not written chronologically. You see that with Daniel. Daniel is the counterpart to Revelation. You have to understand Daniel in order to understand Revelation. So you need to have both to understand what's going on. Okay? So Daniel is not written chronological. It is overlapping. Daniel has visions that may be chronological within that vision, but the visions are overlapping. For instance, he had this vision about the statue with the different metals in chapter 2. And then he had this vision about the 4 beasts in chapter 7 that overlap. Then he had this vision about all the empires, more in detail what these emperors in the different empires did, okay, in chapter 11. Okay, more in detail again than chapter 2 and chapter 7. So he is overlapping. Why? Because he's showing different details of the events. Okay, the same event, same details. Now, Revelation, John is doing the same thing. He has separate visions, and within those visions, they're usually chronological. Okay, but the visions he's having could overlap. He has a vision of writing the letters to the 7 churches. That's in itself an event, something that's happening that is chronological. Many say that these churches, the 7 churches he's writing to, which they are, I think, all the way to chapter 3, and you can read those yourself. Those are various churches within the church history. And I'm not going to say church age because I did that wrong. I did not understand that is actually a word or an expression of dispensationalism. Church age. We don't find church age actually in the Bible. Jesus talks about the age or the time of the Gentiles in Luke 21, I think 24, around there, 25. And he talks about the time of the Gentiles, not the church age. Okay? So there's a difference. So I don't want to use this word church age, but within that time of the Gentiles, there are different kinds of churches. Okay? And these churches that he is writing the letter to are examples or symbolic for this church period, okay, church period that he is describing. For instance, right now we're in the last church, which is the church of Laodicea. We're lukewarm, and I believe it's in chapter 3. I'm going to look. And to the angel of the church of Laodicea, write these things as said the Amen, the faithful and the true witness, the beginning of the creation. Okay, and it says in 16, so then because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, will I spew you out of my mouth. That is the church that we have today. We have a lukewarm church. We have a lot of people that are just calling themselves Christian, but they're not real follower. And Jesus is saying, if you're not waking up and become serious followers, I'll spit you out. Okay, that's what he's saying. So once he's finished with the 7 churches, describing the 7 churches, that is the span of the time of the Gentiles. These are different churches within the time of the Gentiles that have certain characteristics we can find in these historical churches, okay, throughout the 2,000-year span. Again, we are right now at the end, and what happens at the end, that is when we look at verse, I think it's 4 or 5, is when John is finishing the letters and somebody is telling him to come up. In chapter 4, after this, I looked and behold, a door was open in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were a thunder talking to me. And he said, come up hither and we will show thee things which must be hereafter. Okay, so he is going up into the throne room or into heaven, and he sees the throne and he sees what's in heaven. Okay, now why is he going into heaven right there after the churches, the church history? Well, because I believe this is where the rapture happens. John goes up into heaven with the rapture. That's when the door opens. That's when the rapture happens, when, the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled and the church goes up. And John goes up with the church. Okay? Then John has various visions in heaven, or he sees things happening in heaven. In other words, he gets an understanding. Think about, in heaven, you can see exactly what's happening in our time on our earth, just like God does. Okay, so John has a glimpse of things that are going to happen, but he also has a glimpse of what happened even before this rapture happened. Okay, it's saying which must be happening hereafter. Hereafter of John's age. But understand that John is going up into heaven, of course, during his age. But when he goes up, it is already the time of the rapture, which is then 2,000 years later. And now he is looking actually back to what is going to happen after his time again. So what he is seeing, the 7 seals, which are now coming, okay, 7 seals is now coming, are actually overlapping with this time of the Gentiles. Remember, the time of the Gentiles is over when? When the church is taken, when the rapture happens, when Jesus returns for his bride. Why do I know Jesus returns for his bride? I know lots of people don't want to say rapture. So, okay, do I have to stay away from it, or do I have to just say, okay, when Jesus Christ returns? And that is in 1 Thessalonians 4. That's when Jesus returns for his bride. We look in John, I believe 14 or 15 is when Jesus is saying, I'm leaving and I'm preparing a place for you, and I will return when I'm finished. This is what Jesus is going to do, and this is what we call as the rapture. It's not in the Bible. The word is not in the Bible. The event is in the Bible. Okay? You don't want to use it? Fine. Just say what? Whatever. Jesus is returning for his bride. And that's what's happening at the end of the time of the Gentiles. This is also, of course, you can find in Luke 21:24. You can also find that in Matthew 24:29. And he says, when the tribulation is over, at the end of the tribulation. Why? Because all saints go through tribulation. If you read the letters, all these saints in those letters to the 7 churches went through tribulation period. Okay? People. All disciples went through tribulation. They were all killed. Most of them were killed. Okay? It was horrible how many Christians were killed during the Dark Ages. Let's not, I don't need to go there, okay? Let's just continue, because we'll see that later on. So here we go. We are right now saying that now the seals are starting. Now John is in heaven and he sees the 7 seals opened up. Okay? But these 7 seals are not what's coming in the future for him, well, for him here on earth, but not when he was in heaven. Because he's in heaven with the raptured saints. Okay, and I know people don't understand that, but we're saying right now he's seeing the seals. And the seals, the first 5 seals, and you can look at those yourselves, because everybody knows, most people know the seals. There's different seals, okay? And these different seals, different things happen. There's the white horse went out to conquer. That happened in history. How many times have people went out and conquered? The Spanish went out to conquer. The English went out to conquer. The French, not as much, but they went out to conquer. Okay? They all went out to conquer. They all went out and had wars and wars and wars after one another. And what did they conquer? Who did they conquer for? For the man of lawlessness. Okay? That's who they conquered for. And while they were conquering, there was death, famine, and plagues. That's what happened. Okay? Every one of these seals are the result of somebody going out conquering. And that's what happened for the past 2,000 years. Nothing but plagues, nothing but famines. Think about the black plague, okay? That wiped out most of the population in Europe. Unbelievable. You have no idea what happened, or syphilis, or any of the other plagues that were just going through Europe and just killing people. And think about the 30-year war right after Luther, proclaimed the Reformation. 30-year war. There was hardly anything left afterwards. Okay, that was a religious war, and it was a devastating religious war. You need to do history. These things already happened. And then we come to seal number 5, and that's in chapter Revelation 6. Okay, if you go to 6, and we see the 5th seal. Okay, 5th seal. I'm just trying to find it. I see the 6th seal, and I want to find it here. During the 6th seal, he saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. That has happened. These people, they're still happening. They're under the altar right now, and they're screaming, saying, "How much longer, Lord, until you avenge our blood?" Okay, read verse 10. And he cried out with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth?" Who is this? Those are all the martyrs. Those are all the people that were killed during the Inquisition, that were tortured during the Inquisition and during the Dark Ages. Those are the saints. Okay? None of this nonsense saying we are not going through tribulation, or the saints are not going through the tribulation until the end. That's false. Once the rapture happens, once 1 Thessalonians 4 happens, the tribulation for the saints, for the Church of Christ, for the bride of Christ is over, because they will be in heaven. And I'll tell you right now, if you don't believe that, if you think you need to go through the wrath of God, I feel sorry for you, because the wrath of God will be horrible. You're talking about tribulation. Yeah, tribulation is bad. Was bad for the saints. They were tortured. But do you know that the wrath of God is worse? Okay? Far worse. Because people are going to be killed left and right. We're going to go there later on. But watch, the wrath of God. And I'm going to get there in a little bit. So anyways, so this has already happened. And right now we're in the 5th seal. There's no doubt. What we're waiting right now is for the 6th seal. The 6th seal, that is in verse 12. And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. That is right now, and we can continue, because at the end it tells you right there in verse 17, for the great day of wrath is come. and who shall able to stand it. So right there at the end of this sixth seal, the wrath of God has come. It's there, okay? It's there. So that is right there, is what we're waiting for right now. During that time is when the rapture will actually happen. Again, we're at this end of the time of the Gentiles, which overlaps with Luke 21, I think it's 24. You will see when the sun goes dark. And also Matthew 24:29, when the sun goes dark. And Mark 13, and I don't know where it is, but you need to look it up, when the sun goes dark. That's the same thing. That is when the time of the Gentile is over. This is the time when the tribulation is over. Until the time of the end of the tribulation. Okay? That is the point right there. That's when the wrath is starting. Okay? And the people know. And you can read the details. I'm just trying to give you an overall understanding how to understand Revelation. You have to overlap things, okay? Because that's what John does. He goes back and goes into detail, some more detail, or gives you more detail about this time period. Because right now we're in this time period of the Gentiles, the time of the Gentiles. Okay, and I've given you quite a lot of things you can kind of look up, and I will put it on the bottom so you can look it up yourself. So now we're going to go to a different time period. We're going to go, when we said at the end of this time period is what? Is the rapture, or Jesus coming for his bride. This is also when the day of the Lord starts. Okay, the day of the Lord starts when the time of the Gentiles is over, and when Jesus comes for his bride. And the first thing that happens after that, after Jesus returns for his bride, which will not be in public, okay, it will not be in public. He will not be seen by everybody. Matter of fact, he's not even coming down and is seen by the saints. The saints will be pulled out. If you look at 1 Thessalonians 4, you will see that they are taken out, okay, snatched away. Jesus is not being seen by anybody. He's like a thief. A thief is not seen, okay? He's not going to be seen by anybody. So he is up there, and I know some people use it a secret rapture. But there is a secret rapture. It's not a secret for, the believers, but it is definitely a secret for, and I don't even like to use that word. I just think that the unbelievers will not really care or see or even worry about people being gone, because there's not going to be that many people gone anyways. But let's continue and look again. The unbelievers know, if you read verses 12 through 16, the unbelievers know that the wrath is here. But God says something really interesting. He says, hold, okay? Before this whole wrath is being poured out, he says, hold on, I have to do something. So in verse 7 of Revelation, and not verse, but chapter 7, he seals 144,000, okay? Those are the people that will go through the wrath of God. And I have talked about them, so you can actually see some of my videos, and they will go in more detail about that. So then, and I will be talking about these numerous times. So then, in the second part, who they are, and so on and so forth. But then in the second part, he talks about the multitude. Okay, because the multitude is very important. And that starts with verse 9. After this, I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations, kindreds, people, and tongues, stood before the throne. That is now the raptured saints. And John is up there with those raptured saints. He sees them up there when he is up there. Okay? They're standing before the throne. Now these people are not under the altar anymore. Okay? They're standing before the throne, before the altar. They're not under. So these people have already received their transformed body, or their new transformed body. And the people that were still left over, they got, changed in a twinkling of an eye and got their new body. So all of them are up there. The multitude, you read, the definition is the raptured saints, or the saints, the church, the body of Christ, the bride that Jesus came to come and get. If you are not quite familiar with that, read the 10 virgins in Matthew 25, because that describes exactly what happened. Okay? Because John never sees really this snatching out of the believers, or this what we call rapture. Never saw it. Okay? Why? Because John went up there with the rapture, or during that time, and never saw the resurrection of the saints. Okay? He doesn't mention it. He is up there in heaven. And then he sees the multitude in heaven. And those, no doubt, are the saints. And it even says they came through great tribulation. Not the great tribulation, but great tribulation. So here it says in 14, these are they which came out of great tribulation. Now some say the great tribulation, but that would be a wrong translation. It's not the great tribulation, okay? That is false. It's they came out of great tribulation, okay? Because the whole time of the Gentiles is a great tribulation. So they all came out, and now they're up there in heaven. They're taken out before the wrath starts. Now the wrath starts in chapter 8. Okay? That is now the next period of time, and that is the beginning of the day of the Lord. Okay? That's the beginning of the day of the Lord. The bride is secure in the what Jewish tradition calls the huppah. Okay? If you know about the traditional marriage customs of Hebrew marriage custom, original, you know that the bride and the bridegroom go in the huppah, which is the marriage chamber. And that is exactly symbolic with what the bride is doing. Jesus right now is preparing a place. And then Jesus comes when he is finished preparing the place, okay, which only the Father can determine. When that's finished, he will return and get his bride. And then they're in the huppah, in a safe place. If you read Isaiah 26, 19 through 21, it becomes very obvious as well. Okay? This whole thing. That the bride, we're resurrected. Okay, there's a resurrection. The bride is in the rooms that Jesus prepared, and the wrath of God is going on this earth. Very clear. Even Isaiah showed that very clear. And then, of course, in chapter 8 is where the wrath of God starts with the seventh seal and the 7 trumpets. The 7th seal is divided into 7 trumpets. Okay? 7 trumpets. And make no mistake, 7 trumpets are not the only ones that are being blown by God. Anytime God is making announcements, he's blowing trumpets. Okay? There were trumpets during the time when the church was taken out. The last trump, remember? Paul is talking about the last trump. But that last trump is about the Feast of Trumpets. It's not about the wrath of God. Okay? It's about the Feast of Trumpets, the last trump. Okay? When the bride of Christ, the church is taken out. Now we're going into a totally different section, okay, different event which is the wrath of God. And again, God is using trumps to declare what's going on. So there's 7 trumps, and there's 7 horrible things happening. Now, important, you can read this yourself. Some people don't believe that all 7 trumps, are the wrath of God. But when you read exactly, let me see, that is in, I think it's 11, where it clearly says that the wrath has come. It says somewhere, I think it's in 11, it says the wrath has or is come. The wrath is come. That's what it says. Oh, yeah, here it is in 18. So it's Revelation 11:18. And the nations were angry, and the wrath is come. So the wrath came. And that's in the 7th trumpet, right? That's the 7th trumpet. It says the wrath is come. So that's past. So all 7 trumpets in the 7th seal are wrath of God. Now, how do I know that? Because remember, things overlap. Because John tells us again in chapter 16 of Revelation, he gives us again an account of, let's go there because we're not going to, discuss that later on. He gives us another account about the wrath of God. It says in Revelation 16, and I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth. Okay? So when you compare the 7 vials or the 7 bowls, whatever you want to call them, because it depends on the translation, when you overlap them, you see that they are the same thing. Okay, I hope you do, because I do. It's you just don't have to look it. It's looking from a little bitty different angle, but you can tell they're the same thing. So what John is doing in Revelation 16, he's going back and giving you another account of the same thing, the wrath of God. These are not chronological. This is not chronological. All of a sudden down the road we have some more wrath of God coming. No, this is the same wrath of God. Matter of fact, if we go to Revelation 14, we actually see, and I believe it's 14, in Revelation 14, which is, of course, coming before the wrath of God, right? We see another account, actually, of the rapture. And he doesn't call it rapture. He doesn't even see it. He just only sees the saints on Mount Zion. Okay? So let's look at that. Because we have to understand that these things overlap. So when he sees the multitude in chapter 7, okay, he now has a different glimpse about this event from a different angle, okay? He gives you more information. Here, John sees the same multitude on Mount Zion. He says, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their forehead. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, as the voice of great thunder. And I heard the voice of harps harping with their harps. And they sang as it were a song, a new song before the throne, before the 4 beasts and the elders. And no man could learn the song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are not the 144,000 that were sealed. Okay? When you continue to read it, they are the first fruits into God and the Lamb. Okay? They are redeemed from among men. So this is, again, they're described as the bride. Okay? Why do we see it again? Well, God always uses 2 or more witnesses. And here we see 2 witnesses about the same account, which is what? The rapture, which nobody wants, or many people think, oh, it doesn't happen. Yeah, it does, okay? But the church being taken out, okay? And then after 14, what is following is, of course, the wrath of God. In 15 is preparing for it, and then 16 you see the full-blown wrath of God, okay? So this is all very important to understand. Now this video may be a little bit longer than usual because I'm trying to cover the whole Revelation, and probably should be finishing up and maybe do a part 2. I'm thinking about it if I find a good spot where I can actually stop. I'm trying to do this as fast as possible, and we're only at Revelation 14, and maybe I should be stopping right here. Again, this is actually a good time, and then next time I can pick up with finishing up the wrath and the rest. But remember this: the Revelation is not chronological. It overlaps. John goes back and has a more detailed vision about things, and we need to keep that in mind when we want to understand Revelation. We've run into the same problem in chapter 20 and 21, where people think it's chronological when it's really not chronological, okay? When John is just going back and has a more detailed vision about actually the millennium, okay? People are confused. You're going to have to understand that these things are not chronological. So I will come to an end for today. Read these things again. This is the wrath of God. Look what is happening during the wrath of God. You can read Revelation 8 through 11. Okay? You can read, and I'm going to pick up with the wrath at the end, looking at the end of the wrath of God. And then look at the other stuff. But anyways, and then look at Revelation 16 because they overlap. Okay? Anyways, let the Holy Spirit guide you. And next time, I will do part 2.